Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of Couch Coding Custom Upstreams. Your experts for today are Matt Cheney, co-founder here at Pantheon, and Ronan Dowling, senior software engineer, also here at Pantheon. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Please make sure you submit any questions you have during the presentation in the question window. We want to answer as many of your questions as possible, so make sure you keep those coming. Also, the session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone later this week. I'd now like to turn it over to Matt and Ronan.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Nice to do another couch coding here on our lovely custom private upstreams topic. Thanks, Ronan, for joining me. Our good friend David Strauss could not be here because he has to go to the Burning Man, but we will hold it down in his place. Talking about a feature that has been on the platform for a long time in different forms, but has really gotten a lot of prominence and help and real sort of like coolness in the last few months. And for a sort of like quick sort of format of what we're going to talk about today, I was going to talk a bit about just like custom upstreams as a sort of technology that we use on Pantheon. And then I was going to turn it over to Ronan to talk a bit about sort of some of the newer work that we've done to really polish the feature and sort of improve some of the use cases. And then we can talk sort of a bit as well after just about like different agency use cases we see using or organizations using this kind of technology. And then of course we'll be happy to take questions on these topics after we go. So hopefully you'll get a bit out of this kind of couch coding. We obviously do have these things be sort of informal, so we'll try to tell some jokes and definitely ask some questions from what we're up to. We want you all to learn and play around with this wonderful feature. So to kick it off here, at the sort of the heart and soul of every site that you create on Pantheon is some sort of starting code state. You're obviously familiar with the UI. When we go ahead and create sites on Pantheon, my great, awesome site today, we give it a name, we give it an organization it's associated with, and then we're presented with this like list of sites. And this is sort of over the years sort of expanded or contracted depending on sort of what's going on. But the idea is that you can click to say, let's start with WordPress or Drupal 7, Drupal 8 as options. And what actually happens when you click deploy for, like, let's say WordPress right here, is it actually is starting you with a copy of WordPress. It's obviously not going out to WordPress.com and downloading something. What it's doing is it's actually taking a Git repository that we've set up, this one right here, Pantheon Systems WordPress, and it's using this as the starting code base for your site. Now, this is just the latest version of WordPress, but for those who have been following along, we do a few customizations on each of the code bases to like better support the Pantheon use case. So in WordPress, we do some overriding to the way some of the update messages for the auto updates are done. Instead of saying, click here to apply in live environment, we say, go please do this in dev environment. For Drupal, we of course also have, this is a Drops 8 upstream. We also have a Drop 7 upstream. These upstreams, we have a few like things for handling like images and a large number of files and other kinds of performance tweaks. But the idea is that when you start a new site on Pantheon, and this has been true since the very beginning of the platform, you would start with one of these repos. And then when I click this, to deploy the site, it's going to go out and make that association with the site, and it's going to pull down that code base. And the benefits are, of course, you get up and running quickly using the code, so you can get on the internet fast. But a really important feature that you've probably been sort of accustomed to when you're playing along is you get the ability to also apply updates as they come out. So in the case of WordPress and Drupal, you've probably seen yellow sort of boxes that show up above individual sites. Those have commits that you have to apply. Those commits are the sort of updates that you get. what you might also be sort of familiar with is those commits actually are those update messages in the yellow box are actually commits that exist on the in the code base itself. So let's go find a site here to look at. Here's the one we just did. This is a site we did a bit ago. And I'll go find, this is the one we just created. So it is completely new. The only indication we know that it's got the little WordPress logo, but there's an upstream tech thing in the about site. You actually see there's an upstream value right here that tells you that you're using WordPress. And then for actual updates, you'll see here when you have updates available, you get this yellow box and it gives you these updates. These updates are code for code comparison with the actual commit messages on the GitHub. So this is WordPress 4.8.1. This is 4.8.1 second part. There's this other update we did. There was a PHP 7 update. This all works as part of the core platform and gives you these yellow update boxes. So this probably isn't, this is maybe cool new stuff to you, but this is what we've had at Pantheon for a long time. And one of the things that we sort of did, sort of on a private basis, is when folks wanted to go beyond just, starting with Drupal or WordPress, they wanted to have maybe an install profile in Drupal, or they wanted to have like a common start state in WordPress where they already had their plugins and their starter theme in there. We would be able to sort of tell people, hey, if you really want, what you can do is take our existing repos, our WordPress repo or our Drupal repo, and fork it yourself. So take it, make a fork of it, and then start adding your own stuff to the repo. So here's the repo that I had made. It is a fork from the Drops 8 repository. I call it Custom Upstream. And what I've done here is I've actually just gone ahead and added some of the different modules that I like to use for my site. So we'll see here we've got CTools, Page Manager, and Panels. Those are specific modules we've been added. And this upstream, previously you'd have to sort of email support and we would get an icon and set up this option. So when you were to go create a new site, not only would you be able to start normal Drupal and WordPress sites, my great custom site, but you would also, if the organization was connected in the creation, you would get new options to start sites that would be from those custom upstreams. So you'd be able to see, hey, instead of starting with just WordPress basic, we can now start with WordPress customized, or in this case, this example repo. So when I deploy that, I'm now able to get not only my core CMS, but also all of my other sites all at once. And there's some benefits here that I think, maybe you can sort of tease out. The biggest benefit that we see, and we'll talk a bit about this sort of later on as well, but the biggest benefit that I see is when you look at web agencies who are building, 6, 10, 60, 600 sites, there's a process agencies go through for building each site, and it often looks the same. You are going to use, in many cases, the same kind of base theme, the same kind of plugin or module architecture. If you're going to do slideshows, you're going to use the same kind of plugin to do it on site after site. There's a lot of benefits to that. Your designers will design things that might work similarly, your devs can implement them consistently, and your sort of tech leads can choose the right solutions at the beginning to support those use cases. And having that standardization makes things work a lot more efficiently. And instead of, a lot of times people just sort of have tribal knowledge where they just know, look, for every site we're going to set up these modules and these plugins. But instead of having to sort of go through that mental exercise every time, we can actually go ahead and say, let's go make an upstream that includes all that common code we want, so we get that at the beginning. And as we sort of go forward and there's updates to that, if there's a new update to the panels module or to a certain plugin, then we would be able to push out those changes as updates with the yellow update box as well. So you could see sort of from that organization that we had set up, we had to, have an upstream set up for that. You can actually go ahead and we can see, look, for all the sites using that upstream, a few of them have updates that are available. So we could actually go in, click on one of them that has an upstream available, and we would be able to not only see our initial update, but we also see any module updates as well as part of that. And so this same feature that has sort of driven the Drupal and the WordPress core CMS offerings on the platform can also be used to leverage more agency specific use cases, people who want to maintain in many cases in private a custom upstream that starts with all their sites. But, and I'll turn this over to Ronan in a second to give a little more context, but this was a feature that we had sort of had since the beginning, but it wasn't something that was very easy or user intuitive to sort of deal with, because the only way to sort of get access to this prior to a few months ago was to find the docs page that talked about it, file a support ticket, and have us sort of set it up on the back end. But we had a lot of interest. A lot of people were sort of getting into this. And I think that sort of inspired us internally to get a little more sort of organized around it and to start to do a sort of more formal product kind of pass to improve what we have. And I think I can sort of turn it over to Ronan, who sort of led up a lot of those efforts internally to sort of improve those features, and maybe talk a little bit about sort of how all that went down.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Yeah, as Matt mentioned, this is a capability we've had on the platform for a while, and it's core to everything we do. That update, automatic updates are a pretty important part of how the platform can provide value. But if you're an agency, you likely have your own version, your own distribution, whatever you want, whatever people have different names for it. But you have your own packaged set of things you deploy every time, and we were sort of, without custom upstreams, we were sort of breaking that promise a little bit. You had to make sure your modules got updated in one way and your core got updated another way, and it was a slightly second-class experience, except for those who knew the magic key, which was to contact us, and we'd set that up for you. So we wanted to make that available to everybody who could benefit from this. So we created the tools to make this self-serve, so that you can create your own upstreams, as many as you need, whatever makes sense, and you don't have to contact us. So here's the upstreams tab. This tab has existed for a while, but it was basically not useful to most agencies because they didn't have the feature. It would just say, hey, contact us, please. Now, when we enable this feature for your organization, you now have this new ability to add a new upstream. And we worked pretty hard on this form in order to make it so simple. This is a 4-question form. We really sort of worked, we tested it, we stripped it down to just the basics. So what will happen here is, if we grab an upstream repo, and this one looks like it's public. So what you saw briefly there is, this is public, so we don't need credentials to access it. We can just pull it like anybody else. You can spin up sites on this. If this were a private Git repository, if this were your secret special sauce, actually that's not how we do that anymore. We've improved this quite a bit. So the way to actually, if you take that ad out, the way to fake a secret upstream, because GitHub hides them completely, is just put a character after Drupal so that it's at the very end, so that it's there we go. So this upstream doesn't exist, but as far as we know, it could be private. So we now give you the option to authenticate with GitHub. We will go check and see with the authentication if it exists, and if it does, then we can use it. If it doesn't, you're going to get an error that says we still can't access this thing. So we'll give you instructions here to go create a personal access token in GitHub. You're no longer using username and password, which is a little better. You get better control over that access. This should hopefully error out still, because it's a fake token and a fake repo. but you can add a description. You tell us what framework it is so that we know how to clear caches and do the various platform things that are necessary. And then, yeah, if we hit create here, we should see that no, we still can't find that repo because it was totally made up. So yeah, maybe just go ahead and take the J out of there and the space, and then now we can access it. We're actually accessing it live and seeing this is good. We're ready to go. Hit create, and that's it. That's all you have to do. Name it, give it a description, tell us where it lives, and now we know where your upstream is, and you can create sites. Any updates that get pushed to that Git repo will show up on any of those sites. And we wanted to keep that really simple, make that really easy to use, really accessible. So that's the work we did. And then the other big part of what we did was to improve the documentation, to let people understand how this feature works. This is the intro to the doc, but it goes deeper. It's like 5 or 6 pages deep. This is giving you the update of what we just described. Why would you have an upstream? What does it do for you? How does it relate to a site? And then if you want to create one, we'll tell you how to maintain it, basically. So how to have your upstream track our upstream so that when we release a core update, your upstreams will contain that update. That's pretty important. There is a cost to maintaining an upstream. You're adopting it yourself. You have to commit to do that work, but the benefit is any additions and changes you make are your own, and you can get all of that one-click update benefits for ctools and views and all of the plugins or Drupal modules or custom themes, base themes that you maintain. You can apply them to all your sites the same way you can core updates. So that's the basics of the work we did. We've also improved how the spin-up happens in case we lose access to your upstream. You will get that. You'll know that when we spin up now. They'll tell you, sorry, we can no longer contact you. Please check your credentials, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I've definitely found that like the new interface and the new sort of self-serve nature has really inspired a lot of people to try out this feature. It's something that I think, as an agency, it's a pretty easy experiment to run internally. You can basically say, do we want to start with a Drupal or WordPress? We'll fork it. We'll add it in this way. We'll create a few sites, and then we'll sort of see how it works. Very low barrier to sort of entry. The one thing you might run into if you're a new agency on the platform is there might be an item, instead of just saying create new upstream, it might say get in touch. That's basically something where if you're new to the platform, we have a number of agency and training opportunities where we actually can sit down with you for like half hour, an hour, and run through the upstream functionality to really give you a sense of how all of the different pieces work and try to like really set you up even more for success. It's just sort of a nice, and that's just something we want to just give you some info before we throw you loose at this. But as Ronan said, we have a lot of good docs and stuff for all of it.
Yeah, and if you're not new to the platform and it all makes sense, we'll just turn it on for you. So don't be afraid to fill out that contact form. It doesn't oblige you to sit down and talk to us if you just want the feature turned on. That's how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And and you can create it and you can delete it. It's all sort of just part of the way Pantheon does things now, same as sites. So we're hoping some good things from all of this. A few sort of implementation details. So like getting this set up is pretty easy, as we sort of showed. But one thing Ronan sort of alluded to is that there is work involved to like maintain these upstreams over time. The most important thing is that when you've added a bunch of custom stuff to your upstream, you now are sort of responsible for updating that upstream when new stuff comes out. So when a new plugin comes out, or even a new version of the core system comes out, you actually are now responsible for updating, just once, but updating that main repo. So you'll see the upstream that I had created, my custom upstream, that was forked off of the Drops 8. but you'll see that, like, it actually, there was probably an update for Drupal that came out. If we're to compare, it says that, my branch is oh, let's just see tools. Okay, cool. That my branch can be behind, and you actually need to update from the branch that you forked. Pretty standard kind of maintenance, but if I'm forking off of another Git repository, and that upstream itself repository is updated, I need to pull that change back into my custom upstream. And then if any individual modules or plugins get updated, I need to update them all in one place. And that requires some kind of maintenance work. But, the benefits are that, like, this is work you're going to have to do anyway when you're working with your sites. You just happen to be able to do that much easier by doing it just in one place. The other piece that I think is sort of helpful to sort of, to understand is when we are talking about custom upstreams, you'll see that, like, the name of the upstream is associated with the site. It had previously not been possible to change that upstream. So if you had started a site with, WordPress vanilla, you couldn't then update it to, like, your agency version of WordPress. Or if you had Drupal 7, you couldn't update it to, like, your new install profile. Instead, what we would tell you is that you'd have to, like, create a new site with the new upstream, move all of your database and your code over, and then delete the old site and replace it with the new site, which works. But, like, that's, like, a pretty heavy operation for just trying to, like, get all this thing sort of there. And so one other feature we rolled out with the upstreams is it's only available in the Terminus command line tool, but it is this opportunity to actually set the upstream for your site, where you can actually change it to a different upstream. I don't know, Ronan. So what does that actually do on the back end when it changes the upstream?
That's a great question. It sounds very scary. Switching the upstream for your site it's a pretty major operation in concept. In practice, it's very simple. What we do is we simply point the site to the new repository. So the next time you go to your dashboard and look for those updates, you will see the updates relative to the new upstream. So it's a safe operation because we're just switching a reference. You can always switch it back if you don't like the results. When you go and merge those changes, if you decided to switch from an upstream that's has a Git history that's extremely incompatible, the merge may fail. You can then try and do it offline or down on your local with Git, or you can just bail on the whole operation. If you do that syncing beforehand, you'll see nothing. You'll see nothing in the dashboard until that next update gets pushed, and it'll come from the new source, not the old source. But we wanted to make sure that this was a safe operation that people could be confident doing, so they could experiment. You're not going to destroy a site by doing this. Like I said, if you somehow manage to get to upstreams that are extraordinarily hard to merge, it simply won't merge, and you'll get that notice in the dashboard. We will prevent you from shooting yourself in the foot too much by trying to switch from a Drupal upstream to a WordPress upstream. There's very little chance that that's going to be a successful operation in any circumstances. So we will check that the frameworks match. If that becomes an issue, it's probably because you set the framework wrong on your custom upstream or something. But that's the only checking we do, just to give you a reality check. As a matter of fact, that wouldn't hurt anything either, because the apply wouldn't do anything. But that's all it does. Switches that reference, and then the magic comes in the apply updates. And you may have to do a force merge. You may have to consolidate locally. But if you're moving from a vanilla core Drupal 8 to your own version, and you've based it off of ours, which you should be doing so that you can get our updates to the core, then everything should go pretty smoothly.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's one thing that's pretty important to sort of understand. Underneath all of this upstream technology is just is just Git doing a variety of merge and remote and update kind of operations. That every time you click that yellow box to apply an update, that's just doing a Git merge. When you're changing the upstream, it's changing your remote. It's, you know, and it's all stuff that you can reverse and undo and revert and stuff like that. It's a pretty flexible kind of operation. One thing, Ronan, I think from a settings perspective, you have to run it on the master branch. Is that correct for the upstreams?
That's correct. That's again, as a way of simplifying this, we discovered that 98+% of our upstreams users were using the master branch, and those that weren't were doing that in order to test rather than to have a production upstream. So we just decided to remove that setting, to remove that. If you have a very strong, compelling need to use non-master branch, that's something we could set for you. Still contact support for changes like that, but it was not something that a lot of people needed. So it will be the master branch by default.
Yeah, definitely Pantheon kind of philosophy is like give a simple case to like get people going. You could change it sort of later if there's complex.
Yeah. Another one you'll see here that you didn't see on the last screen was initial connection mode. So with this upstream, every site that gets spun up will be spun up in Git mode initially. That doesn't mean you can't change it after the fact, but that's the initial settings. We default that to Git for Drupal 7 and SFTP for Drupal 8 because Drupal 8 requires that for installation. That just save you a step. It's sort of a smart default. But if you need to change that, if you decide, oh, actually, our Drupal 7 site has its own installer that needs SFTP mode, or we just always develop an SFTP mode before we go live, you can change that here. We just didn't feel like that was a decision you needed to make initially.
Yeah, try to give people the right info to make the decisions. Another piece I think was really cool is that now it'll tell you how many sites are actually using the upstream when you see the settings for it. That's pretty helpful because you can see, hey, there's nothing using it, you could get rid of it, or there are 9 sites. Like this is important for my organization.
Yeah,
which is pretty awesome. Is there any limit, Ronan, to how many of these things you can have, or what's the?
There's there's a practical limit, but we're not enforcing hard limits right now. That doesn't mean we won't, but it will be high enough for most people. It'll be high enough for everybody.
Awesome. And we can do some all this stuff we can use Terminus for, right? Like we can create sites using the upstreams and muck around with the upstreams all using Terminus.
Absolutely. Anything you could do before with a core upstream, you can now do with a custom upstream. So you can spin up a site and say, before you would say I want Drupal, now you would say I want my agency Drupal distro. You can, so yeah, upstream set, you can get info on the upstreams. It's sort of similar to what you'd see in the dashboard. Get a list of all the ones available to you. You'll see ours, you'll see yours, you'll also see some of the third-party ones that have various levels of support. We recommend, if you're doing something like that, to maintain your own, because if you're using an upstream from a third party and you don't know what their policy is on security updates and whatnot, you're better off having that control in your own hands.
Yeah, one of the things for folks that are sort of following along at home is especially the Drupal space, there's been a number of like install profile sort of products that have been built on top of Drupal 7, primarily things like Panoply and Open Atrium and Commerce Kickstart that are sort of like website in a box kind of things. And those are implemented using the upstream kind of technology that we were talking about. And you can access those sort of using the command line or on their specific spin-up pages as well. And that'll create an upstream relationship. The people who make the install profile then maintain that upstream on behalf of their distribution of Drupal going forward. Yeah, we sort of took that technology, and a lot of what the work we've done recently is expanding that to more agencies so they can use it for internal stuff, not necessarily like website in a box they're trying to get everyone to use, but but rather just like their own flavor of WordPress or Drupal for their specific agency. And we definitely want to get some questions. I think the last piece I sort of wanted to run through with folks is our sort of use cases that I've seen in the agency world using this kind of technology. We do a lot of training and talk to a lot of partners here at Pantheon who use the platform, who use this technology, and trying to get a sense of sort of from them what they've been successful with doing. And I'll give you sort of three sort of options that I've seen people be successful. So option one is a sort of upstream that's designed for a specific sort of client use case where they need multiple sites of the same kind of thing. So a number of agencies do work with universities. A university might need 50 websites that all sort of work the same way. Or you might be working for a nonprofit who wants to create subsites for each of their chapters that they're working with. Or you might have a project where you need to roll out 20 sites for, you know, each different, like, you know, part of the country or something like that. And one of the things you can do with a custom upstream is you can start for your project and say, okay, we're going to build 20 sites. We're going to build 200 sites. Let's go ahead and build an upstream that is custom code just for that project. So we did a case study recently with like Fairfax County Public Schools out of Virginia. They have several hundred sites that all have a lot of the same needs. Same kind of branding needs, same kind of like sign-on needs, same kind of base module framework needs. So they built a distribution for their school district, and then they can keep adding new schools as they sort of come online to their organization and be able to use the custom upstream to manage that. When a new update comes out for the school-wide distribution, they can update once and go from there. And that's a really good way to sort of pitch a project. You can use Pantheon's Containerize technology to have every individual site be its own little container or big container, depending on how big, but share a common code. So that's something I think definitely seen people be successful with, is sort of per project upstreams. Second use case that I think is really helpful is sort of what I would call like a scaffolding or a starter state kind of project. That's where an agency will say, look, for a Drupal or a WordPress project, here is the standard set of modules and themes that we use to get going. Instead of having to add those manually each time, let's go ahead and just build those into a starter custom upstream. And then we'll just have every week, we'll just update it and update for the rest of our sites. And this is really a sort of quick start for projects that you can basically get up and running with your modules and your themes sort of installed in a standard way really quickly. That's good to sort of kickstart development and get going quickly. It's also good if you're doing sales demonstrations or prototyping, that you can like quickly spin up a prototype to work with your existing stuff. And so we see some agencies that just like, they may only have 5 different modules or themes that they use on every site, but that's in their install profile, and they go from there. And then the third use case that we see are people who are actually trying to build some sort of more like fleshed out like version of Drupal or WordPress, where maybe they have some sort of drag and drop building tool, or they have, you know, a number of plug and play kind of components. And we see people use upstreams to sort of build a sort of, you know, easy to install thing where maybe they're building 20 sites as an agency every month. A lot of that work is content. It's like CSS and design. So they sort of make this like really quick start version of WordPress or Drupal they can spin up, and then they spend all their time adding content and customizing. So we'll see folks that work in verticals where they work with a lot of restaurants or a lot of tour agencies that have a sort of starting thing for like all the tour agencies they work with, and then they customize and theme as appropriate. The good thing though about this kind of technology is that you can really, as Ron said, you can have as many of these as you want, and you can meet multiple use cases for your agency. The real sort of point at which I think you might want one of these as an agency is when you look in and say, look, am I having the same code on like, you know, more than 5 of my sites? Do I have to update it individually each time? Maybe I can go ahead and build and build a custom upstream so I can save myself some time and get rolling a little faster. So that's like the overall sort of vision and some of the cool stuff with the custom upstreams. I think maybe we could switch it over to get some questions, and you know, please ask anything sort of people have run into working with this or stuff that comes up. We can jam for 20 or so minutes and get as many of these answered as possible.
All right, I'm going to jump right in here. The first question is there a way to add an upstream to an existing site?
Yeah, I can start with that. I would say, so every site will have some kind of upstream, and you can find that by going to About site here. It might just be WordPress or Drupal 8, which means that it would just be our sort of like core versions on here. But if you want to use that terminus command to switch the upstreams, you could switch it to a more complicated upstream if you wanted. But all will have at least one, and then you could switch it if you want.
All right, next question is, currently Pantheon Docs says, we do not recommend custom upstreams for Drupal 8 sites managed by Composer. What is the status for that?
I could probably answer that. So yeah, so like philosophically, those are kind of not quite incompatible, but they're two very different ways of managing that upstream code base. Custom upstreams are very much Git-based. There's a Git artifact that you're pulling in as whole. You get the changes, but you're not doing a build step. You're not pulling in your external dependencies. So there are a couple of ways to handle it. Some people will use Composer to build their upstream because they want to be able to pull updates to Pantheon as though they weren't using Composer. They want to sort of ignore that step, use it for development, but build it out, push their artifacts, the output to GitHub, and then pull to their sites. Other people just want to use Composer. They've got a more sophisticated DevOps operation running. They've got Circle. They've got all these great tools in place, and they just want our upstreams out of the way. So what we do for that is we maintain. You can't not have an upstream for a site. That's fundamental for the platform. But we do maintain a number of empty upstreams that will set the framework for the site. You can set metadata in our pantheon.yaml file, which is a topic for a whole different webinar if you're not familiar with it. But what we won't do is we won't push any updates to that. Anything that isn't basically, if we might push an update if we think we got the wrong PHP version or something, but we won't push updates. There won't be. So here we go. Here's one. It's just got a README. So anything you push to your site, you won't get bothered in the dashboard with updates that you can't apply. That was a problem in the past where people just have to know, don't push that update button if you're using Composer instead of upstreams. Now you just base it on an empty upstream. We promise never to push anything that's going to conflict, and then you're sort of bypassing those tools in favor of a different set of tools.
Yeah, I think one related thing that I use this empty upstream for is occasionally I'll want to like play around with JavaScript frameworks or like static HTML kind of work, and I just want to like use Pantheon to like do some sort of web project, but it isn't actually a CMS project. And so I actually have a upstream that I created for my organization just called like static HTML that uses this empty upstream as its foundation, but it's designed for me just to like quickly spin up a site with index.html and then just start like playing around with stuff on the Pantheon system. Before I'd have to like install Drupal 8 or something and remove all of it and then like try to add it that way, which was just unnecessary. This way, if you just want to do a quick HTML app, you can just do it that way.
And then one more point on that. So as we've kind of demonstrated, there's a couple of layers to an upstream. There's the repository that lives in GitHub or also Bitbucket if you're a Bitbucket org. And then there's the upstream within our system that takes that repository, adds a name, adds a description, adds a framework. And those are the basics where we're adding name and description are just for your use, but framework is for us, and that's important. So you can go do one of two things if you want this empty upstream. You can take an empty repository. You can use ours. It's public. It's got nothing in it, so we're happy to share that code. You can create your own empty empty repo. You can create an upstream in the dashboard based on that with whatever framework you want. Or you can use, we have 3 maintained empty upstreams. It seems like overkill, but we have one for Drupal 7, one for Drupal 8, one for WordPress. All it will do is set the framework correctly so that your cache clear still works and the platform knows what you're running for Nginx config and a few other things that are critical if you are running a composer-based or even just any other way of building. But if you're running those CMSs, you want to be able to tell us that you're on the right one.
Awesome.
All right, next question. So the updates to Upstream get automatically applied, but what if we want to release site by site?
Yeah, so I talk a bit about the update process. So when you apply the update to the upstream, you're making a single commit to your upstream. That won't actually affect any of your sites yet. In order for the sites to actually inherit that kind of upstream, you need to go over to the product and click on this apply updates button. This will actually go in and run that merge command to take the new upstream update and apply it to the site. And so that's something that you can manage on a per site basis. You can do this in the dev branch. You can actually also do this in the multi-dev branch if you want as well. And you could do that on a per site basis. One cool plugin I think Ronan helped with a lot was this Terminus mass update command that you could also run. And what this will do is this will basically go through a list of your sites and sort of click that apply update button automatically for, say 20 of your sites all at once. And this way you can, deploy out the update only to the dev environment, mind you, but you could do that all as one sort of like common thing versus having to click the button each time. It's sort of part of the automation we see people building with Terminus. But in general, like the updates to your sites are treated like any other code commit. They have to start off in multi-dev or dev. They then will go into test, and then they will go into live. It's just part of the workflow.
All right, next questions. Can we add config files and custom upstreams so we can have a bunch of content types preset upon site creation?
Yes. Anything you can add to a Drupal or WordPress site, you can add to your upstream. You can, as I mentioned, Pantheon YAML, you can configure the platform to some degree using your upstream. So if there's certain things, PHP versions, things like that you want to set every time, you can do that. And then within Drupal and WordPress, of course, we're opening up a huge huge can of worms here, and like how do I create a content start state for my site? There are lots of good answers to that. Some people will just sort of bundle up a database. That's not, anybody who's done that knows why that's a good idea and a bad idea. It's very simple, but that database gets stale. That can be a pain. You can create an install profile in Drupal. You could do something kind of more custom. There's content staging modules, content example modules. We don't take a strong opinion on the best way to accomplish that for your org, because it will depend on your needs and how much of its demo content, how much of its configuration. With Drupal 8, obviously, you can do like most of the config can be exported to code. That could be part of your upstream. You could create I think Matt's showing off is this sort of, you could create a Quicksilver hook so that the first time you install, your config gets imported. WordPress, there's a whole slew of other options for doing that. So yeah, if you think of it as the same way you would basically do it with a distribution or for your local development, it works very well here.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Ronan. I think one of the Quicksilver is a platform hook system we have on Pantheon where you can do stuff when deploys happen or databases are cloned. One feature that we added sort of more recently to that is the ability to run a custom script when your product is deployed, which means when your upstream is created for the first time. So we have folks who will actually put, and you can totally do this, put tons of Quicksilver code in your upstream so that your Slack will always be notified, your configuration will automatically be imported, you will have your database sanitized, etc. And one of the things they also might do is after you do a deploy on the platform, which is create the site, you might call a separate script that'll then do a Terminus site install or automatically set up the site, maybe turn on some modules or import some config or something like this. And so you can actually sort of use the upstream to set up the code and then use Quicksilver to do even more complicated operations as part of that. Anything you can do in Quicksilver, you can also put in your upstream, and those changes will get managed along with the rest of the code.
Okay, next question. What are the advantages between custom upstreams and WP multi-site? I work in higher ed and administrate a number of multi-sites. Custom upstreams seems more flexible, yes?
Yes. Yeah. I would say there's definitely a decision that you're going to need to make if you're looking at a project where you need to make, let's say, 50 of one site. That you can use a WordPress multi-site, or in the Drupal space, you can use a domain access kind of module approach. And that means you'll have one site with a bunch of domains on it, and you'll use the Drupal or WordPress sort of switching of the domains to handle what sites are what's being shown for each domain name. There's some quickness to that because you build one site, you maintain one site. But the problem that you run into is you don't get, to the question, a lot of flexibility. If you change one site over here, if you change the site to try to reflect one change, it could break for all the pieces on the site because you only have one monolithic kind of site. If you use this custom upstream approach for a higher ed use case, every department could have their own individual Pantheon site that could, of course, build out a custom feature or do some override of the code on a per site basis. If some department chair wants something to be done to her site in this way, you can totally do that. You don't need to affect the other sites on the platform. So you get that flexibility. The cost is that you also now you're managing 40 sites, which with some mass update and some scripts you can manage pretty easily. But there's a little more work to manage 40 sites on the platform than just one. But you get the advantage of being able to customize all 40 and have them be resource and security isolated from each other. In the case of a WordPress multi-site or a Drupal domain access, you're sort of all eggs are in one basket, which can be risky for a lot of use cases.
And you can test and deploy those 40 sites separately, which is a big deal for a lot of people. It's that extra maintenance is a benefit or is a cost, but it can also be a benefit.
All right, next question is, can you use GitLab?
The user interface, the self-serve interface, does not support GitLab. We did a sort of a survey of our users and discovered that it was 90+% GitHub and Bitbucket. So we restricted to those for the user interface in order to make sure that our credentials gathering was safe, secure, and easy. We do support GitLab with the old sort of CSE initiated process. So open a ticket and somebody will be able to set up a GitLab upstream for you. You just won't have quite as much control.
If you had a public GitLab URL, could you just paste it in here, or would that be something you'd have to talk to us for?
You'd have to talk to us. One of the reasons too we want to hear from you is to find out what your GitLab needs are, because it's much easier for us to find GitHub users and Bitbucket users and find out what their needs are. But if we hear from you, we can actually help create the next version of this that supports things like GitLab.
Awesome. Yeah. So GitHub and Bitbucket are supported automatically. For other Git repos, we can use any Git repo that you provide for us. You'll just have to contact us directly if you're using a non-GitHub, non-Bitbucket approach. We can hook it up for you.
All right, next question is, what about the pricing? I still need to pay for 40 different sites, ?
Yeah, so from a pricing standpoint, like this functionality is available for free for agencies on the platform. You just ask us, we'll give you the ability to do this. But you're still going to end up paying if you use this for 5 sites and 5 sites go live. You would pay for each of the 5 sites. That's sort of part of like any other site. If you're using upstreams or normal, you still would pay on a per site basis. If you do have 40 sites or a large number, definitely give us a call. We have a number of sort of discount and bulk pricing options available for you to help out with that.
All right, next question is a little bit of a lengthy one, so stay with me here. Would it be possible to build a starter site custom upstream that would allow you to install the latest version of your theme on install and then later update the core via the Pantheon interface without updating the theme or modules? Can you choose which specific parts to update from the Pantheon site dashboard? Let me know if you guys need me to repeat that.
No, I got it. So the question here is like, can we update parts of the upstream, not the whole upstream? And I think the answer to this is anything that you commit to your Git upstream will become available as a one-click on any of the sites. So if you want to start with a theme, but want to start with a theme, but like never update the theme, but always update core, then just make sure on your core upstream repo that you're only updating core, not the theme. In cases where you do say make an update to the core, the main repo, the upstream repo, but you don't want it applied to an individual site, you can't pick and choose what actually is applied. You sort of have to apply it all at once. But what you can do is it's Git. So you could, when you pull down the upstream updates for this, you could revert specific changes and and override certain code. The flexibility of this approach is you can sort of inherit the upstream in its totality, but every individual site runs Git, and every individual site can be overrid or reverted as appropriate.
Go ahead, Ronan. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, if you really are just looking for the start state and not the continuous updates, then you're probably not looking for custom upstreams. But if you have a situation where you have sort of some sites you just want to keep it up to date with core, some sites need to be on the freshest version. You can get pretty complicated with this, but remembering that it's Git and it's Git all the way down, you could have multiple upstreams in something of a tree. So you could have your base upstream that gets updated, that has everything from security, and you're going to update all of your sites no matter what. You could have one based on that may have a specific set of overrides for a particular type of client. And then using Git remotes, you just sort of manage that chain a little bit. You can definitely overbuild that, but it's an idea if there's a sort of an exotic scenario where you want to have 2 different classes of sites that get different kinds of updates based on maybe the customer involved.
All right, we're going to sneak one more question in here. And that is, when an upstream is updated, do the production deployments of all of the dependent sites need to be manually triggered?
Yeah, I can take that. So when you do an upstream update, like I just did on this site into dev, you still have to stage it as another commit to move it to test, and then another one to move it to the live environment. That it's treated the same as any other code commit you might make. So to push it to a production environment, you have to deploy it out to test and deploy it out to live. As a little bit of a teaser, if this is something that's like you want to automatically do, we have actually cool CI scripts for both WordPress and Drupal where we actually use the terminus command to automatically apply updates from the upstream. We check to see if there's updates. We apply the updates automatically, and then we'll actually deploy them out to a test. And with some visual regression testing, we can even deploy them to live as well. But yeah, in general, the upstream updates only happen in dev. You still have to push them through test and live. But if that's something you want to happen automatically, check out some of our docs on automatic updates. We've written CI integrations for Drupal and WordPress to do this automatically for you.
I would also say you're not alone in setting this stuff up. You're not going to send you out on your own. Make sure you mention that when you go to sign up for this feature. Make sure to mention that need, and that's why we'll get in touch with you and help you figure out how to do this stuff.
Yeah. So definitely check it out. Click on Upstreams on the Pantheon dashboard. Click Get in Touch. We'll turn it on for you and help you out with any additional trading you want. We think this is a really great feature. We think it can help a lot of agencies, and definitely thanks for hanging out, learning a bit about it, and asking such good questions.
Yes, thank you all so much for watching. If you have any additional questions or feedback, please visit our website where you'll find a Contact Us page, and we'll put you in touch with the best member of our team. And be sure to join us for the next edition of Couch Coding. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.